Why, in the books, is Jaqen H'ghar in Oldtown? Is he there to kill someone or to learn something? If so, what or who? Let's take a look. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. On this channel we dive deep into A Song of Ice and Fire, as well as other great fantasy books and TV shows like The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher. This video is the next in my series on the role of the faceless men in A Song of Ice and Fire, because they are a lot more than just an assassin's guild. You can watch this as a standalone video, but it builds on a lot of what we covered earlier in the series. In this video, and the last one, coming out soon, we'll be tying together a lot of threads we unpicked earlier about what the faceless men actually want. So if you want to go back and watch those videos first and then come back here, feel free. The starting point for this video is that in the books, although not in the show, in the prologue to A Feast for Crows, the faceless man we know as Jaqen H'ghar seems to have arrived in Oldtown, the seat of the Maesters, for reasons that are initially not entirely clear. As he's a face changer, we obviously can't be entirely sure that this is the same person, but George R.R. Martin has dropped so many hints and clues that it seems beyond reasonable doubt. Scrolling back to the last time we saw Jaqen, in roughly August of the year 299 AC, he took his leave of Arya after trying to persuade her to go to Braavos with him. She decides not to at that point, wanting to go back to her family. So Jaqen leaves without her, saying that he has duties to attend to. Presumably not hugely time-critical duties, as he was willing to take Arya to Braavos first, and he changes his face, his Jaqen face apparently no longer useful to him. We get a good description, though, of his new face. His cheeks grew fuller, his eyes closer, his nose hooked. A scar appeared on his right cheek where no scar had been before, and when he shook his head, his long, straight hair, half red and half white, dissolved away to reveal a cap of tight black curls. This is interesting, not just because it's the first time that Arya sees a faceless man changing his face, but because 6 months later, someone calling themselves the Alchemist with that exact description appears in Oldtown in the prologue to A Feast for Crows. For the most part, he keeps to the shadows and doesn't reveal his face, but when he does, it is described like this. Ordinary, with full cheeks and the shadow of a beard. A scar showed faintly on his right cheek. He had a hooked nose and a mat of dense black hair that curled tightly around his ears. Full cheeks, a scar on his right cheek, a hooked nose and black curly hair cropped short. Now, this could just be a coincidence of descriptions, but what happens next seems to suggest that it isn't. The prologue, and therefore the description we have, are from the perspective of Pate, a dim and not very talented novice in the Citadel. He is failing his exams and is obsessed with taking the maidenhead of Rosie, a young woman at a local tavern, but he can't afford it. He needs a gold coin. Happily for him, an alchemist suddenly appears and offers to give him a gold coin in exchange for use of a key to the Citadel that he is uniquely in a position to steal. We'll come back to what this key is in a moment. Pate thinks about it for a few days, but then decides to go for it. The alchemist meets him in a darkened alley, and Pate asks to see his face and asks who he is. The alchemist replies that he is no one, as if we need more of a clue, and gives Pate the coin. Pate bites it to check it's genuine, like he's seen others do, and he keels over, apparently poisoned. It's a mirror of the assassination we saw Arya do for the faceless men, biting a poisoned coin. Pate's heart seems to give out. So someone calling themselves No One, who looks exactly like Jaqen's last appearance, and kills people using a classic faceless man trick, it's Jaqen, or more accurately, the faceless man formerly disguised as Jaqen, who can tell what his real name is. Jumping forward another few months, at the very end of A Feast for Crows, Pate reappears in a Sam chapter, which should immediately arouse our suspicions because Pate seemed to die at the end of the prologue. All characters with POV chapters in A Song of Ice and Fire prologues or epilogues die. It's a George R.R. Martin thing. So presumably Jaqen has now stolen Pate's face. Anyway, Sam has just arrived in Oldtown, and he doesn't know any of this background, and is ushered into the presence of Archmaester Marwyn, a curious character who has clearly attained a high status in the Citadel, but feels very differently to them. He cares about magic and glass candles and prophecy and dragons, unlike them. In fact, he's outright opposed to them and disparaging of them. He briefly questions Sam, hearing that Maester Aemon wanted to go to see Dany and advise her of the prophecy surrounding her, and then heads straight off to the docks to try to get a ship to meet Dany for himself, as Aemon is now dead and he wants to take his place. There are several interesting characters in Marwyn's group, Leo Tyrell, Alaras, but right at the end, the reader's attention is drawn to Pate, who is also there. Him introducing himself to Sam, "I'm Pate," like the pig boy, is actually in the last sentence of the entire book. Like Pate had the first chapter of the entire book, we're supposed to make the connection. And if we were in any doubt, Pate seems different to how he came across in that prologue, not in appearance, but in character. He seems cleverer, interjecting with explanations and proactively tells Sam that he is called Pate like the pig boy. Pate the Pig Boy is a well-known comedic character from Westerosi folklore, a comparison that we know from the prologue that the real Pate hated, and yet now he is proactively embracing it. There are other clues too, whether he calls dragonglass or obsidian, and so on. The clear conclusion from all of this is that the alchemist in the prologue was Jaqen, self-identifying as no one. He killed Pate using the Faceless Men's poisoned coin technique that we've seen Arya use, took the key that Pate had, and assumed his appearance. So the Pate that we see at the end of A Feast for Crows is Jaqen in disguise, and he's been in Oldtown for 6 months. So why take Pate's appearance, and why does he want that key? Well, the key is a master key to the Citadel. They are seemingly held by Archmaesters only and allow access to all areas of the Citadel. Pate is novice to Archmaester Walgrave, who is old, very old, and seemingly suffering from something like dementia. He, perhaps alone among the Archmaesters, wouldn't notice it to go missing. And Pate, clearly, is bribable to steal it. Taking on Pate's appearance also allows Jaqen a reason to be in the more secret parts of the Citadel. If cornered, he can always claim to be on a task for his master. If all we'd had was that one prologue, then we would probably assume that Jaqen was there for an assassination and just needed access. But we do get that extra chapter several months later and discover that Jaqen is still there and is still disguised as Pate. Is he still casing the joint, preparing for an assassination? Even for the Faceless Men, that seems like a very long build-up. So presumably, he either completed his mission and has found some reason to stay, like he hung around for a while earlier in the story when he saw Arya's potential, or he was there for some other reason. Either way, it seems intentional for him to be in Marwyn's company, because if he were trying to stay low profile, he would have just stuck to Archmaester Walgrave's rooms. So, who is Marwyn, and why might Jaqen want to ingratiate himself with him? Marwyn, known as Marwyn the Mage, is a bit of a rogue maester, and the people who talk highly of him aren't necessarily the people you would want to. Earlier in the series, long before we met Marwyn, Qyburn said that he was the only person in the Citadel to take his work seriously. Even earlier than that, Mirri Maz Dur said that she studied under him. We hear that he spent some time in Ashai, which is quite a sinister place, and he wrote a book called The Book of Lost Books. In the Book of Lost Books, he claims that he found something of the prophecy of Daenys the Dreamer that led to the Targaryens abandoning Old Valyria before the Doom, and perhaps even the precursor of Aegon the Conqueror's prophecy that we learn about in House of the Dragon, and got George R. R. Martin's thumbs up, the Song of Ice and Fire. Marwyn has also apparently got a glass candle to work, a magical communication and observation device that had been long thought to no longer work. Through that, he has been tracking Sam and Maester Aemon heading south, which brings us to that last chapter of A Feast for Crows. Maester Aemon was also a student of prophecy and was convinced that Dany was the prince that was promised. Now Aemon is dead, Marwyn takes his place and heads off to tell Dany about her prophetic role. Before he goes, though, he finds a moment to advise Sam about what he should do next. You should stay and forge your chain. If I were you, I would do it quickly. A time will come when you'll be needed on the wall. It seems like quite a throwaway phrase, but it shows what he thinks is important. Dany is important, but so is the wall. Dany's job in his mind seems to be to embrace her prophetic role and defeat the others, or something like that. Which brings us back to Jaqen. Given what Marwyn is about, why is Jaqen getting involved in that? Well, let's assume that Jaqen wasn't there for an assassination, or perhaps he was but then decided to stay because of what he discovered there. It's a reasonable assumption. Jaqen has been there for at least half a year, and perhaps as long as a whole year. It's a long time. So he's there on a mission for the Faceless Men. And as he has ended up getting close to Marwyn, it must be connected in some way with what Marwyn is up to, telling Dany that she's the prince that was promised and ultimately defeating the others. Is there any way the Faceless Men would be interested in that? Well, yes, there is every way. If you think back to the start of this series, we looked at how the Faceless Men aren't just a cool assassins guild. They are a religion committed to the god of death. Vala Mugulis isn't just a cool phrase, it's a statement of faith. All men must die. What if that religious order discovered a threat to the whole world that spat in the face of their core belief that all men must die? By making zombies. Humans no longer die. They get raised again as whites. The Faceless Men will be absolutely and fundamentally 100% opposed to the others on theological grounds as well as the obvious practical ones. Perhaps Jaqen only discovered about all this while in the Citadel. His quarters with Walgrave are right next to Marwyn's, and Pate seems to hang around socially with Walgrave's novices, so perhaps he was sent to Oldtown in the first place in order to learn more about this threat that they've heard about. Getting the key from Pate could just as easily be about getting access to ancient scrolls of wisdom as it is about getting access to an assassination target. If anywhere has knowledge about how the others were defeated the first time around or how they could this time, it's Oldtown. Just to pick a few random examples of what we know or suspect is there, there's Blood and Fire, the classic text about dragons, and Unnatural History, Septon Barth's seminal work on the same subject, tomes about the Stark Kings of Winter, histories of Valyria, banned and lost texts, prophecies, and much more. That is why Jaqen is in Oldtown, or has stayed in Oldtown, not for an assassination, but for knowledge. There is an existential threat looming for Westeros and Essos, and a heresy in the eyes of the priests of the many-faced god of death. All men must die, and the others threaten that natural order of things. In the final video in this series, I will set out how all of this fits together in the whole Faceless Men master plan. But what do you think? Why do you think Jaqen is in Oldtown? Let me know in the comments section. If you'd like to see more videos in this series, please click on the link on the left of your screen. Or to support this channel, the best way to do that is by clicking on the link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.